Welcome back to part 2. We're going to pick up with the idea of demilitarization. This is an additional clause included in the Treaty of Versailles of 1919 targeting Germany. So demilitarization is really exactly what it sounds like, a reduction in military force, or a reduction in military presence, let's say. After the war, France is afraid. They really worry that a strong Germany could reemerge and be a threat to them once more. So to counter that, to ensure it doesn't happen, the Treaty of Versailles insists that Germany reduce its military to no more than 100,000 men, 100,000 troops. If you think about just the sheer scale of World War I and the size of the battles, and the number of men involved on both sides, imagining an army of just 100,000 men for the nation of Germany is kind of a shocking contrast. Okay, we're speaking in terms of millions involved in some of these battles. Sorry, there's a bug. In terms of millions involved in some of these battles, and here after the war, Germany's reduced to nothing. And so, again, that feeds back into that concept of international embarrassment, a sense of shame, a sense of being victimized by the rest of Europe. The last area here from the Treaty of Versailles that's really significant is the idea of war reparations. France is left with a lot to rebuild, and they really don't have the means to do it. So the plan is to charge Germany, to send them the bill for all of the things that were destroyed. When you think back to the War Guilt Clause, if Germany's responsible for the actions, Germany then would be responsible for paying for them. We know that these reparations weren't completely paid off until 2010, so it's a massive bill that Germany doesn't have the means, really, to make this happen. So instead of raising taxes, instead of trying to, sell off property, Germany really doesn't have these options. So what do? They start to print money, and print money, and print money, and print money. And ultimately, all of that extra money flooding the market devalues the Deutschmark. It makes their money worthless. So for many Germans, direct results of the Treaty of Versailles include a failure of national morale, a sense of embarrassment, a sense of victimization, and the very, very real impact of a struggling economy. So that's one major factor or major idea that contributes to Hitler's rise to power. Right? All of these components of the Treaty of Versailles help set the stage to let Hitler stage a successful campaign, essentially, to become dictator, more so than to become president. Let's look at some other factors that are happening. We're still talking right at the end of World War I. The man with the rather impressive mustache you see on the screen would be Kaiser Wilhelm II. Remember that in German, Kaiser is the equivalent of a king. This man was running the country throughout World War I. By 1918, the people of Germany are fed up with this war. They've been suffering for years. By 1918, over 2 million German lives have been lost in World War I. So in 1918, the fed-up German people really band together to rise up against Kaiser Wilhelm. He's forced to flee the country and give up his throne. So let's dig into this German Revolution a little bit. It lasts essentially from 1918 to 1919, and there are pretty much 3 main causes that this happens. One, the absolute failure of Germany in World War I. Again, 2 million German men have lost their lives in this battle. By 1918, they know it's a losing fight. And here's the Kaiser trying to push ahead. It's not good for him, and it doesn't encourage the support of the public. Issue number 2, general hardship throughout Germany. The soldiers are not the only ones suffering here. Allied nations have blockaded Germany. The citizens are having a hard time getting food. Kind of in addition to this idea of hardship, by August 1918, Spanish influenza is sweeping the globe, a literal pandemic of severe flu, and really no one knew what it was, what was causing it, why all of these people were getting sick and dying. It was mostly the young that were getting sick and dying. So you add those two factors together, the war that's just dragging on and hunger, and this mysterious illness that's affecting people all over the world. You can imagine that Germans are kind of fed up. They're sick. They're sick of the situation, and literally sick, and they need a bit of a change. The third factor that really plays in here is the Russian Revolution. We spent a significant amount of time talking about it in class. Just know that Germans were able to look over and see their neighbors to the east having a successful revolution that threw out a dictator who had drugged Russia into this ridiculous war, and they had instituted some new, more democratic policies that seemed to benefit the people of Russia. Germans were looking at their neighbors, they saw how that revolution panned out, and were really thinking, we can do this kind of thing as well and be successful. So again, 1919, Wilhelm is thrust out of the country. He leaves his throne, he leaves his power, leaves all of that behind. And Germany introduces a democratic constitution. German delegates meet at the city of Weimar. That's why it's called the Weimar Republic. They write a constitution that's got, some pretty good ideas to it. Unfortunately, the constitution is pretty weak. The central government doesn't have sufficient power to pull Germany up and out of the problems that she's experiencing. So all of these reparations that they're trying to repay, all of the economic issues that their money problems are causing are blamed on the Weimar Republic. And they really don't have the central authority to do anything about it. So just imagine a room full of delegates, a room full of legislators who are trying desperately to come to some agreement about what the future of their nation should look like, and they just can't quite get there. There are some interesting parallels here with the Weimar Republic and the United States under the Articles of Confederation, and that's something you might want to explore independently or maybe next year as you move into U.S. history. Just know that there is a very weak democracy in place. The German public really don't have a lot of faith in this democracy because it's not proving that it can do the job. So, what happens? The German people need someone to put their faith into. They need someone who gives an aura of power, of authority, of someone who has a plan, just to give a sense of security, a sense of, here's someone we can believe in. And I think you all know who steps in to fill that role. We saw in the film, The Rise of Evil, that Adolf Hitler was able to encourage the German public. We saw the massive rallies he was having even before he has a true, legitimate position of power in Germany. People were talking about this man. They were reading newspaper articles about him. And they're just seeing, hey, here's a guy with a plan. Here's a guy who says, we can pull ourselves out of an economic depression. We can fix our problems. We can regain Germany's position in the world. And here are some ways we can do that. So that's just an overview of some of the political reasons or political factors that allowed Hitler to rise to power. The Kaiser is left. There's a weak republic in place, and someone has to step in to fill the position of leader. There's a power void. That spot is just ripe for the taking, and Adolf Hitler is the one who steps up to take it. So we looked at at least one of these illustrations in class, the children playing with stacks of the Deutschmark. Remember that the money is worthless. People are really suffering in Germany throughout the 20s as a result of the reparations clause in the Treaty of Versailles. But, unfortunately for them, we know that in 1929 the Great Depression begins. And this is a global economic collapse. We usually think about it in terms of the United States, but it does have literally a global impact. So if you look here at the chart, we can see from 1921 through to 1928, German unemployment is kind of moderate, right? It's not terribly high. There's a spike in 1926, but never does it get above 2 million persons unemployed. So what impact does the Great Depression have? Already these Germans who are suffering an economic downturn are hit again and harder because of the Great Depression. People are losing their jobs. They're unable to purchase food for their children. And we can see that by 1932, the year before Hitler takes power, unemployment is at something like 5.5 million German people. So again, someone who comes forward with a clear plan and says, I can put you to work and I can pay you, is a really appealing candidate for power, even if that person is spreading a fascist message. Interestingly enough, throughout the Great Depression, the United States, and watching these dictators rise to power, had some concerns for its own democratic future. FDR is sitting in Washington and watching these things go down, and he says, you realize that when people are hungry, when their children are hungry, when they don't have a job to go to, when they don't have a paycheck, people are willing to turn away from their faith in democracy if it means that a positive change will occur. And we have to change things here in the U.S. We have to roll out the New Deal to keep that from happening here. So once Hitler is in power, let's flash forward a little bit. What kinds of things does he do? Does he promise that he delivers on that help the German people? He remilitarizes, brings back the military, says, we need to have this. This creates some jobs. So not only for men who are soldiers, but people who are working in arms factories and defense factories. If you're manufacturing guns, you're working. And in working for the government, you get a paycheck, for sure. It's a guaranteed job. What kinds of other things does he do? Public works programs. In the United States, we associate that with like the WPA or the CCC. We saw it in the propaganda film, Triumph of the Will, if you watch that with me. So the young men with their shovels, they're going out to build roads, they are planting trees. In fact, they build the Autobahn. So he's putting people to work and improving Germany with things that all the people could take advantage of. So he's shown within his first few years in office, in power, that he's doing better than the weak republic had before. So I think that illustration, that information, would help you understand part of the reason people had so much faith in Hitler. I mean, I know you remember reading towards the end of Night, the young man in the concentration camp, he tells us, well, the only person I can believe is Hitler because he always delivered on his promises. I think that the German people probably felt that way as well, just as much as the Jewish individuals who were suffering at his hands later. Do know, so in 1933 this would start to drop off. This chart here, the unemployment chart, after Hitler takes power, it would look like a mirror image on the other side. So from 1933 onward, you'd see a downward trend in unemployment. Ultimately, most Germans are employed under Adolf Hitler.